Humans appeared like sparks in the endless dark of space, their ships gliding past rings of ice and glowing clouds of gas like fireflies on a breeze. They watched planets spin silently below, some cloaked in storms, some shining with frozen light, and others veined with rivers of liquid fire. Curiosity burned in their eyes and wonder filled their hearts for centuries. They had dreamed of this moment to step beyond the cradle of their world and touch the unknown. Now the cosmos spread before them like a garden waiting for hands that could heal or break. They descended onto a world with oceans of liquid crystal that shimmered in colors no mind had named, and forests of trees taller than mountains, whose leaves whispered secrets when the wind passed through them. The humans set foot on the soil, feeling the pulse of life beneath their feet, and marveled at the fragile perfection of it all. They brought instruments that hummed and glowed, tools designed to tend and measure, to map and mend. Yet even as they worked, the ground quivered slightly, and the stars blinked with unreadable intent. They spread seeds that glowed faintly in the darkness of twilight and watched them sprout into shapes both familiar and strange. Creatures of unknown intelligence peeked from shadowed glens, and eyes of many colors followed every movement. The humans laughed and spoke to each other in tones of awe and delight, unaware that the very act of touching was bending the balance of this world in ways too subtle for them to perceive. The cosmos had noticed, and it whispered through the winds and through the turning of the moons, a promise of marvels and a warning of storms yet to come on. A planet of silver oceans and forests that shimmered like glass. The humans set to work with a mix of excitement and reverence. Their hands brushed over soil that glowed faintly beneath their touch, and they planted seeds that promised life and wonder. Unlike anything the galaxy had seen, some sprouted, instantly curling into delicate shapes like coral. Others grew slowly, twisting and writhing, as if testing the world around them. The humans watched in fascination and whispered encouragement to the tiny shoots that trembled in the breeze. The forests around them shifted as if alive, welcoming the newcomers. Yet some trees recoiled from the touch, while flowers opened to reveal shapes that seemed impossible. The humans recorded every moment, marveling at the interplay of life and light, unaware that with each careful placement of a seed or healing of a leaf, they were bending invisible threads that held the world together. Deep under the surface, a network of roots and veins pulsed like a heartbeat, responding to the new energy flowing through it, and creatures with eyes like molten silver and wings like shadows watched quietly from high branches and crystal cliffs. As days passed, the humans learned the rhythms of the planet. Tides and winds seemed to dance around them, and the sky shifted colors in ways that mirrored their moods. Yet beneath the beauty, subtle fractures appeared in stone, and water trembled in ways too slight for human senses to detect. The planet was alive in ways they could not measure. It was teaching them as much as they were teaching it, and the humans laughed and labored and dreamed, believing they were caretakers, unaware that every act of care carried with it the seed of chaos waiting to awaken and reshape the world in ways no one could yet imagine. The humans labored tirelessly under skies that shifted in colors beyond their understanding. Stars pulsed faintly in rhythms that felt like a heartbeat, and comets arced through the heavens, leaving trails of light that seemed to whisper secrets in a language they could almost feel but not comprehend. Every movement of their hands sent ripples across the planet. Waves in the silver oceans shimmered unnaturally, and the forests swayed even when no wind blew. The humans paused occasionally to marvel at the strange phenomena, and noted them in glowing devices, unaware that the world was listening and responding to their presence. At night, the creatures revealed themselves more boldly, eyes gleaming like shards of glass, and voices that were only hints of sound fluttered through the air. The humans reached out with cautious wonder, their curiosity burning brighter than any fear. Yet every touch of leaf or stone carried an echo that spread far beyond their perception through unseen currents that twisted the very fabric of the world, and the sky above seemed to murmur warnings in patterns too subtle for their instruments to detect. They began to notice the smallest anomalies, shadows moving against the light currents of water, bending unpredictably, and storms forming in impossible patterns. But each time they smiled and pressed on, convinced that the planet would forgive them, that their care was enough to guide the fragile life they had touched. Yet deep beneath the surface, a network of veins pulsed with unease, and the stars themselves seemed to hold their breath as if watching a child stumble toward greatness or catastrophe. The humans worked and dreamed and shaped, unaware that every act of nurturing was writing the first lines of a story that the cosmos would not forget. The humans watched in awe as the forests they had nurtured stretched toward the sky branches entwining in impossible patterns, and leaves shimmering with colors that no eye had named. Flowers bloomed in spirals and waves, sending scents that made the air thrum with life. The oceans mirrored the sky and reflected stars that seemed closer than ever before, yet beneath the beauty subtle cracks began to form in mountains, and the ground shivered. Beneath their feet, streams twisted in ways that startled even the most experienced caretakers. The humans marveled at their creations, believing that life itself responded to their touch, unaware that every act of growth carried with it a hidden tension that threatened to undo what they had built. Creatures of the forests grew bolder, some approaching with cautious curiosity, while others lingered in shadows, observing every movement. Their eyes glimmered with intelligence and ancient understanding. The humans spoke to each other in tones of delight and triumph, recording measurements and sketches, yet the planet whispered in silence. Waves pulsed in patterns that hinted at fractures, and winds carried murmurs from places no human had touched. The sky seemed heavier at times, as though pressing down to test the limits of their creations. At night, stars blinked in irregular rhythms, and auroras shimmered violently across the horizon, sometimes splitting in two before rejoining, as if warning the humans of imbalance. Yet they continued planting and tending, shaping the rivers and sculpting the forests, believing their care was enough to heal every imperfection. The fractures deepened slowly, unnoticed by most, but felt by the oldest creatures, who moved cautiously across trembling stone. The humans laughed and labored, dreaming of perfection, unaware that the seeds of chaos were growing alongside the blossoms in every careful hand, and every act of nurture bending the fragile world toward something neither beautiful nor safe. A black comet drifted slowly across the sky, leaving a trail of fire that danced like living threads, and the humans gazed upward in awe and fascination, wondering if the universe had sent a gift or a warning. The winds carried a chill that brushed over the forests and oceans, and the creatures grew silent, as if listening to voices beyond human hearing. The humans tried to record every anomaly, every flicker of light, every strange vibration in the ground, believing it to be part of the world's response to their care. Yet, deep in the shadows, the pulse of unease grew stronger. Sickness came in forms that were almost imperceptible. The auroras flickered in patterns that seemed deliberate. Stars blinked in sequences that suggested intelligence, and the tides shifted with a rhythm no human had predicted. The humans puzzled over the signs, marveling at the beauty and mystery, unaware that each message carried a warning older than any star. The planet itself seemed to whisper secrets, and the forests moved subtly, as if pointing toward truths the humans could not yet grasp. Despite the omens, they pressed on, planting healing seeds and sculpting rivers, shaping mountains and coaxing life to bloom. Their laughter echoed through the crystalline oceans and across glittering forests, yet every act of care sent ripples through unseen threads, bending reality in ways that left the air tense and the ground restless. The oldest creatures moved cautiously, glancing at each other with knowing eyes as the comet passed, leaving streaks of darkness and fire behind them. The humans were enchanted by the spectacle, believing it a sign of progress, yet unknowingly they were writing the first warnings into the story of the worlds they tended, and the cosmos watched silently, holding its breath for what was to come. The humans stood at the edge of frozen seas and dying suns, their tools humming and glowing in the dim light of distant stars. They paused to consider the fragile balance of the worlds before them. Every action they had taken had sent ripples through the cosmos. Every act of care had hidden consequences, and yet their hands itched to continue, to shape, to heal, to nurture what others might abandon. The forests they had tended were taller and stranger than any known life, and the oceans shimmered with colors that belonged to dreams rather than reality. They chose to act, believing that skill and wisdom could correct the smallest imperfection. They sent energy through withering rivers and coaxed warmth into frozen lands. They touched the dying stars with hands of light and shaped the winds to calm storms. Yet every miracle carried a shadow, every spark of life they rekindled tugged at threads that had lain still for eons. Creatures of the forests watched with wide, unblinking eyes, and the air thrummed with anticipation and unease. The humans spoke to each other of triumph and progress, unaware that every choice was bending the world in ways no hand could undo. At night, the skies shifted strangely, colors bleeding into one another, and stars blinked in rhythms that suggested both warning and patience. The comet passed again, leaving trails that shimmered with silent messages. The humans recorded and studied, yet could not understand the full weight of what they had done. Each act of care brought new growth and beauty, but also fractures that festered beneath the surface, and the oldest Beings of the planet moved with caution and respect, aware that the line between creation and destruction was thinner than a breath. Humans pressed forward, fueled by curiosity and compassion, believing they could manage the chaos. Yet the cosmos waited silently, knowing that one day they would see the cost of their choices, and that every miracle carried the seeds of something far greater and far more dangerous than they could imagine. Stories of the humans spread across the galaxies, whispered from world to world, carried on the solar winds and the shimmer of distant auroras. Civilizations, both great and small, spoke of beings who could shape stars and heal dying planets, yet every miracle came with tremors, storms, and fractures that left entire worlds trembling. The humans were celebrated in some eyes as saviors, and in others feared as harbingers of ruin. Their names became legend, even among creatures older than the oldest suns, who watched in silence from hidden forests and frozen mountains. The forests and oceans they had nurtured glowed with unnatural life, and rivers carved new paths without guidance. Winds shifted without warning, and the stars themselves seemed to twist in response to their touch. The humans continued their work with devotion and joy, unaware that every act of care carried the weight of unintended consequences. Galaxies whispered in patterns that no human instrument could record. The echoes of their deeds traveled across space, bending light and time and leaving subtle scars on worlds they had never visited. Some creatures approached, boldly seeking guidance or protection, while others retreated into shadows, whispering warnings among themselves. The humans welcomed every encounter, offering healing and nurture, yet the cracks beneath, the beauty grew deeper, and the subtle tremors in oceans and mountains became harder to ignore. The planet and the cosmos watched and waited, knowing that the humans were powerful but naive, and that the balance of life was far more delicate than any caretaker could comprehend them. So their legend grew, filled with awe and fear. With stories of creation and destruction intertwined, humans became symbols of hope and terror the galaxy itself could not ignore. Their presence, every act of care, a potential blessing, every touch a possible curse, and all the while the cosmos whispered secrets of consequences that had yet to come. A star shattered in the distance, scattering shards of light and fire across neighboring worlds, and the humans watched in horror and fascination as the energy rippled through space, shaking planets, oceans boiling, and winds twisting into violent storms. The forests they had nurtured shivered and trembled, and the creatures that had once approached boldly now fled into hidden crevices and high branches, aware of danger that the humans could not yet understand. The cosmos itself seemed to pulse with judgment and anticipation. They raced to repair what they could, coaxing warmth into dying rivers and mending the fractured crust of mountains. Yet every attempt to heal seemed to trigger new tremors, and the oceans thrashed with fury beyond human comprehension. The skies above glowed with violent auroras, and stars blinked in erratic patterns, as if signaling both warning and frustration. The humans realized with growing dread that their care had consequences far beyond what they had imagined, that every touch had written changes into the worlds they tended, and that even the smallest act of nurture could cascade into disaster. The oldest creatures of the forests moved, cautiously studying the humans with eyes that had seen millennia pass. They whispered in vibrations the humans could not hear, and the comet passed again, leaving streaks of darkness across the horizon. As though carving a path of silent judgment, the humans paused together, for the first time feeling the weight of everything they had done, knowing that their compassion had also sown chaos that could not be undone. In that moment the humans understood that caring was never simple, that creation and destruction were threads woven tightly together, and that they were both healers and harbingers, that the galaxy would remember them, not just for miracles but for the storms that followed, the beauty and the danger intertwined in every action they had taken, and every world they had touched. The humans pressed onward across the endless void, guided by curiosity and compassion, aware now that every act of care carried with it the weight of consequence. Every hand that nurtured life also risked bending it toward ruin. The forests glowed with strange brilliance, rivers twisted in unnatural but beautiful ways, and stars pulsed in rhythms that seemed to respond to their every thought. The creatures of the worlds watched cautiously, sometimes approaching with trust, sometimes fleeing into shadows, yet always aware of the paradox of the humans who gave and who broke in equal measure. They traveled from planet to planet, shaping oceans and sculpting mountains, coaxing life from barren soil and healing wounds that no one else could see. Yet even as they labored, a subtle tension followed them. Like a shadow across galaxies, the auroras shimmered violently, the comets traced warning paths, and the oldest beings whispered in vibrations that humans could feel, but not interpret, reminding them that care and chaos were inseparable threads woven into the fabric of existence. In the quiet moments between stars, the humans paused and wondered if their purpose was to heal or to disrupt, if their curiosity was a blessing or a curse, if the beauty they left behind was worth the tremors and storms that followed. They touched worlds with gentle hands and watched life flourish while remembering the price of every miracle and the cost of every act of love. So they continued, never stopping, never turning back, leaving a trail of wonder and peril intertwined across the cosmos. They became legends of creation and destruction, symbols of hope and terror. The galaxy would remember them as caretakers of the cosmos, harbingers of chaos forever, walking the line between life and ruin, guided by compassion and haunted by consequence.